So like I've said, I've lived in a few haunted houses in my life. I'll try to remember all of them, but well, here goes. The Compound. Now, this place was originally owned by my grandparents. My parents bought it from them and decided to expand the house and turn it into a compound. In my country, it's common to have a communal compound for the family. Now, people have had experiences everywhere in this compound. Chain clanking, cold touches on their feet, children laughing, plates, forks and knives banging, that one white lady at the basement, that other white lady at the corner of the living room. Anyways, these are mine. My nanny. This is the story that my mother told every nanny that came after that nanny. It's not to scare them or anything. It's more of a warning that someone's always watching them. So, it was late afternoon, and my nanny at the time was preparing stuff for my bath time. I was a toddler at the time. As she was preparing things in the bathroom, she heard me laughing and giggling and babbling in my crib. She decided to take a peek to see me interacting with nothing, as in, she could not see anyone. By this time, the sense of dread had crept up her spine, giving her goosebumps. She did the most sensible thing anyone could do. She left me in the crib and ran downstairs, where my mother was working, and proceeded to have a panic attack. After that, weird shit started happening in the house and around me. Our intercom system would beep, and when my mother would pick up the receiver, she would hear the whooshing of wind. Her exact description is that it sounded like the wind, but in a deep place, like an underground cavern, like in a grave. Doors would open and close. Random banging sounds could be heard when the doors to my room were locked. At this point, only my mother and my nanny could stand being near me. My mother for obvious reasons, and my nanny because it was her job. So my mom got a medium. I think it was my aunt. Anyways, the medium said that a dead person had attached itself to me. She said the dead person used to work in this house. Something finally clicked in my mother's mind, and her and my dad decided to visit the nanny's grave. It was a 2-hour drive and in another city. They told her that she was dead, and she had to leave me alone, believe it or not. That worked out apparently, according to my nanny's dad. She was also haunting them in their house. He said he could understand why. She was only in her early 20s when she died. The Playmate. This happened to the same nanny who left me in the crib. The same thing happened, only this time I was on a bed. She was preparing stuff for my bath time at around noon that day, and she heard me again, giggling and babbling. By this time, she was dreading what she would see if she took a peek, but she did it anyways. This time, she saw something foggy and white on the bed with me. And again, she left me in the room on the bed, and she ran to my mother. Upon which my mother calmly got up, went to my room and picked me up, telling the nanny to continue running my bath. The White Lady. This happened a few years later. I was 4-ish, and my mother was entertaining a few guests in our house. So again, she left me with my nanny at the time. The previous nanny had quit because she was able to secure an overseas contract. I was playing with my outdoor toys at the garage at the time, and then all of a sudden I froze up and ran full speed towards my mother. I was screaming and yelling and crying about a lady. My mom asked what the lady looked like, and I answered, "She's wearing white and she's floating and she has no face." My mom brushed it off for the sake of the guests, but she would not let me leave her side that day. The Piano. This happened a year after the White Lady incident. My cousins were in our house. I forget why, but there was about 11 of us there, preteens and kids, so we were playing in the house, and me being the littlest cousin, I always got left behind. The adults had warned us not to go into the basement, but well, we went anyways. We were there for a while, playing and squealing and screaming, you know? It was general mayhem, and then something started banging on the piano, which was at the living room. The oldest cousin did a quick head count to make sure that we were all there and no one was playing some stupid prank on us. We all ran upstairs, with me trying to cope with running up the stairs. Before I got there, I heard them all scream, and I saw them scatter, so I stopped moving and just stared at the piano. The cover of the keys were still closed, and then one of my oldest cousins came back and grabbed me and then ran away from the piano. Later that night, they told my mother what had happened, and we all got yelled at for going into the basement. The Shadow. Fast forward 12 years later, I'm a 17-year-old teenager trying to score my first date via telephone. So I'm hanging out at the terrace, chatting up this girl I liked. My dog, who was also chilling at the terrace, suddenly growled. He stood up and ran towards one of the gates that led to the backyard, barking and growling and in full attack mode. The girl asked what was going on and why my dog was so loud, and I actually chuckled and jokingly said he had gone insane then. A black thing flew just beyond the gates. The thing was solid black, but had a shadowy aura. I could not see through it, and it was moving so fast that it only took one blink before it was gone. I quickly said goodbye, and tell that I'd call her the next day. I went inside, leaving the dog outside, even if I wanted to carry him to my room and cuddle him because he was just as scared as I was. Sadly, he was not allowed inside the house. Freaky old woman. This happened when I was 17 again. I was standing on the same terrace, singing along horribly and at the top of my lungs with my CD player on full blast. It was around 12 a.m. So this old lady, who I assume was the neighbor's mom, peeked from her window in the dark, and she just stares at me. I give her a peace sign, and I yell out an apology. She disappears. I assume she went back to bed, and I continue with the horrible singing. The next time I see her, she's outside their gate, glaring at me. Again, I shrug this off and yell out an apology. Nothing else happened that night. I go about my business and go to sleep. The next morning, though, I could not talk. My larynx had swollen the size of a golf ball. There was no pain, I just couldn't talk. As in, no sound came out of my mouth. It lasted for a week. The antibiotics didn't help. I had high fevers, chills, and no voice. A week later, I asked my neighbor if their mom was around that night, and she said yes. I asked if her mom had gotten up in the middle of the night. She said no. I saw her mom walk up behind her and, well, she was the complete opposite of the woman I had seen. The Whisperer. This happened when I was 18 to 19 years old. It was around 10 p.m. at night, and I was trying my best to fall asleep. My sisters were in their room with me. They were already sound asleep. At the point between sleep and wakefulness, I forget the signs of REM sleep, etc. I hear a female voice whisper my name right beside my ear, and like a fool, I answer with a sleepy grunt. She whispers again. This time it's teasing. Like a girl would between giggles, I grunt again, and then I tell my sleeping sisters to stop fucking with me because honestly this shit wasn't funny. It takes a few minutes and then the voice giggles. A little kind of giggle. A teasing giggle. I shoot up from my bed, and just a split second later, I'm standing and walking and kicking my sister's bed, angry but afraid at the same time. My sisters are in deep sleep. They don't even feel me kicking their beds. The feeling of fear and dread slowly creep up my spine. And then the voice calls my name and giggles again. Her voice was like a shot. I take off running to my parents' bedroom and jump onto my mom's bed, and I'm shaking and babbling, and I was just so scared. My mom jolts awake and she asked what happened. I tell her about the voice. She nods and tells me to sleep. The next day, I saw rosaries hanging close to the windows, but that night, I heard my mom and my sisters talking about it, and I distinctly heard one of my sisters say to get a psychiatrist to check me out because I could simply be crazy. I don't say anything. I just go to bed that night, disappointed. The funny thing is, a few nights later, the same sister who said I was crazy was studying in the bedroom for her finals or whatever. So, she's studying and reading her notes. She's sitting on her bed, and then she sees a pair of feet float past her. She looks up and sees the woman floating 3 feet in the air, and the woman stops near the nightlight. She leaves her notes and runs out of the room. I overhear her tell my mom about it, and I simply tell my mom that my sister could be going crazy. She's seeing things after all. This earns me a glare, but I didn't care. I could have high-fived the spirit right there. The lady. I'm alone in the house this time, and I'm watching TV in the living room. Suddenly, this lady, dressed all in white, kind of transparent, floats towards me. It floats right past me, turns left, and heads to the bathroom. At this point, all I could say was, really, come on. This is the least scary experience I've had in the house. Our new maid was an Aswang. So an explanation, an Aswang is a person, usually portrayed as a woman, who turns into this horrible demonic thing at night. The Aswang's diet consists mostly of people, I'm not sure of the specifics, unborn babies, men, women, etc. Unlike the men in Nengal, they don't grow wings and fly. Their bodies also stay intact during the transformation. The men in Nengal's upper half separates itself from the lower half, and they fly off to feed on babies or unborn babies. The Aswangs become Aswangs via the black chick, black egg, black stone that their older relatives who are dying pass on to them, as in, it's a spit-covered black thing that the old person regurgitates out and then they eat it, allowing the old person to die and them becoming the new Aswang. I know this all sounds crazy and impossible, but so does a Bigfoot, okay? Also, it's Philippine folklore. Anyways, my mom finally found a new maid because the last one quit. We were all glad because honestly she was nice, and she was good at giving full body massages. I had the flu at the time, and she offered to watch me, which in hindsight was not a great idea because some part of the myth says that they feed on sick people's fluids by boring holes on their backs with their tongues. Fucking ew. She quickly became the family favorite, but she had this habit of disappearing at night, or so the other maids say. One night, one of our maids, out of curiosity, followed her out. She sneaked around, Skyrim style. She follows the new girl up to the rooftop of the other building, and this is what she saw in her words. I saw her sitting on the roof, in the dark. She's sitting there. Suddenly, I hear growling noises. Her head was moving every which way. Her eyes were wide and wild and red, and her tongue started getting longer and longer. At this point, I just ran away. She stopped there and she shuddered, and my mom just nodded, calmly, like always. A few days later, the new maid makes up an excuse and leaves. We don't know exactly why she left. Maybe because she'd gotten caught. Houses we rent. At around 22, I decided to move out of my parents' house. My girlfriend had just come back from America, and well, I decided that I didn't want to live away from her anymore. These are the stories of the various haunted houses we stayed in, because we sure know how to pick them. The townhouse. This was not the first house we rented, but it was the most decent one. I never really experienced anything here. My friends were terrorized in this house though. It started with voices that sounded like mine, calling my friend's name, and ended with legs on the stairs, legs that weren't mine or my girlfriend's. We had to leave because we couldn't afford it anymore, so on to the next house. The house everyone warned us not to move into, but we did anyways. This was the desperate choice at the time. It was big but cheap, in a decent subdivision. Right off the bat, my girlfriend and I said yes, it was perfect. We had plans of turning the front area into a small store. The first thing I noticed in the house was the unbearable heat. As in, I had to pour cold water on my head because it was that hot. The next thing I noticed was that my friend wouldn't stay over anymore. None of our friends were comfortable in that house. One of our friends came to visit, and she wouldn't look anywhere but the TV, and she said the creepiest things. There's a woman, dressed in black with red eyes. She just floated by. Then my best friend, who had no house in the city, suddenly decided to move back to her mom's farm. She just left, said something about her grandmother, and poof, gone. The last thing I noticed was how my girlfriend's behavior changed, a complete 180-degree change. She wouldn't eat, she slept all day, she didn't do much, barely worked. She started getting really quiet. She was depressed most of the time, angry sometimes. It was so strange. I figured out why though, when one night I couldn't sleep and I just lay there. I watched her and she started to kick in her sleep, like she's having a nightmare. I wake her up and she's fine. She has a nightmare again. I wake her up and surprise, not my girlfriend. Her eyes had changed. That was the worst thing. They looked like she was ready to kill something, anything. And then the violence. She punched me on the hand, but she's never punched me ever. Girly slaps, yes. Punching like a dude, no. And the tone of her voice and the way she spoke, it all changed. Needless to say, I was scared, really scared. Like pee myself scared. Even our maid was scared. She abandoned me. Something in the back of my mind kept telling me that to get her out of the house, just to get her the fuck out of the house, but I couldn't lift her. The girl is half my weight, and I could not lift her. She was that heavy. I decided, okay, let's try outsmarting this thing. I asked her to come with me to the store. It was 3 a.m.-ish. We had one cigarette left, and I wanted to smoke more. She doesn't budge. She just kind of glares at me, growling out her words. Inside, I'm panicking, like full-blown panic, but I try to be calm on the outside. We couldn't find my grandmother's rosary. The maid literally leaves the room and locks herself in her room after that. I had no idea what to do. I was bordering hysterical. And then an idea pops into my head. If I can't get her out of the house, I should probably just get her out of the room. So I say the stupidest shit ever in my life. Babe, I need to shit. You need to come with me. I'm scared of the dark. She glares again, her fists balled up into cute little fists. As if she's assessing the truth of my statement, and it's true too. I'd gotten so scared that the need to shit was there. I was literally gonna shit myself. She huffs. I let out a small sigh of relief, and we head over to the bathroom. I light my last cigarette, and I do my business. She glares down at me and asks to take a puff. My hand shook as I handed her the cigarette. She took it and flips it around her fingers, which she doesn't do because she smokes all feminine-like. She took a long drag and then handed me back the cigarette. I was close to tears. I was thinking that maybe I should take the kids and leave, but I love her too much to abandon her. So I sat there on the toilet and almost cried in fear, frustration, and anger because how can I protect her from something I can't see or touch or fucking beat the shit out of? I offered up a silent prayer to anyone or anything that would listen. I forgot what I said in my head. I was frantic. I finished my business, and then she kind of shook or shuddered or whatever. Again, the first thing I saw were her eyes clearing, and then suddenly she was back. She looked at me all weird and asked what she was doing up, what she was doing standing there, and then I asked if she remembered anything. She shook her head and laughed when I told her the story. Up to this day, she won't believe the story, but everyone else does. We moved out the next day. I called my mother, said we needed a place. She laughed and said, well, I just had your old room cleaned because I knew it. I told you so. The experience lasted only about 1 to 2 hours, but it felt like it lasted all night. I couldn't sleep for 2 weeks after that. And finally, my best friend talked about her hasty retreat because it was a retreat. She was almost asleep when she couldn't move, and when she looked up, she saw 3 shadowy figures standing above her, looking down at her. That's it. We left that house, left our deposits and everything, and we just never looked back. My mom's house again. We lived at my mom's house for a while after that house. Nothing too bad happened. But one night, we went to the laundry room to get clean clothes for the next morning when suddenly, my girlfriend turned pale, and she started tugging at me. She was scared and frantic. I almost dropped my clean clothes trying to catch up with her frantic running. When we finally got to her room, she dropped the clothes and sat on the bed. She looked really spooked. I asked her what happened, and then she said, you know that window in the laundry room? I nod. Well, there was a very angry-looking old woman glaring at me from the window. I kind of just said, oh, she didn't sleep that night. The asshole lawyer's townhouse. I specifically asked the lawyer who owned the apartment complex if anyone died in the unit, and she said no. Technically, the bitch wasn't lying. The guy actually got shot right outside of the apartment still. What a bitch. Anyways, no one ever saw the dead guy. However, my cousin saw a little boy running around the apartment and the stove turned itself on. The gas was off. All in all, it was a good house. The house was like luck plus 100 in RPG speak. The most horrifying thing while staying at that apartment was the lawyer's attitude. Second to the last house. This house felt really peaceful. It was homey and the previous owners loved it and asked us to love it as much as they did, and we did. We took care of it, and the lady that lived in the basement, she was nice. She wasn't human though. We don't know what she was, but she woke my girlfriend up from sleep paralysis. However, she did go a little apeshit when my girlfriend's mom decided that it was time to bond with her daughter and move in with us. Heavy hardwood doors slammed on their own. We could hear banging, and my girlfriend's mom instantly didn't like the place. I apologized to our unseen housemate, and we figured out why the lady hated my girlfriend's mom. She nagged and yelled. She got us to give the house up and move to a crappy place, which is where I'm living now. The crappy house. My biggest worry when we moved here were thieves. I was wrong. The house had been abandoned before the owners decided to fix it up and rent it out. It's cheap, and while the repairs were made easily up for it being so cheap. Honestly, the electrical wirings aren't even done right. Some lights won't turn on, the sockets need a little jiggle before they work. Plug in enough gadgets and the lights start flickering, the plumbing is bad. Anyways, this is a repairman's nightmare. It started with the little things, dreams, someone imitating voices banging on the roof, the dogs howling. It escalated to imitating my girlfriend's body and face, imitating my girlfriend's mom, imitating my voice. Then, the sleep paralysis started settling in. It happened to the maid a lot. She started getting weird dreams of dead people asking for help. Depression gripped me in a bad way. It was like the house was preying on us, using our weakness against us. And then came the sightings. The woman who floats by my girlfriend's mother's window at night. They can hear crying from my room with no one here, etc. Bloody footprints, stuff like that. And then my maid has a dream of a dark, hairy man strangling her. The electric keyboard we keep in the storage suddenly turns itself on and starts playing random keys. It's unplugged. I finally had a chance to travel for a few weeks, not staying in the house for more than a week at a time. That's when the small tree outside my window kind of died, and my depression alleviated almost completely. I put up an altar in my room, and my dog sleeps right in front of it when he can. He forces my door open most times. One morning I wake, and there are deep, long scratches down my back. There's the constant smell of flowers and candles, and my girlfriend and I once saw a smoky, foggy thing float past us a few feet above our heads. The maid was kind of possessed for a while too. She kept complaining that her body felt heavy and that she always felt tired. She's grumpy and sometimes she remembers sleeping and then asks me what she's doing standing up near the faucet. She does not remember that she opened the gate, put things away and other stuff. My best friend gets sleep paralysis here too. She does not feel safe here. I do though, in my room. A friend said that nothing could get in and stay because it was already full of my energy or something like that. Here's the kicker. The building in my mom's compound is supposedly haunted too. 50 plus spirits of dead people and an angry lady anyways. My mom's fixing that up so I can move there soon. Shit.